Okay, thank you all for joining me today on this, what I can only call a confusing period of time. I guess I should have had my sunny background on. It's not in the middle of a war, so to speak, but it is rather confusing. I spoke to a close friend this morning who's usually very self-confident. He knows everything. Someone who used to be in the world of intelligence here, and he said, I have no idea what's going on. No clue at all at this point, and no clue whatsoever what's going to happen. And that's very much the feeling at this point. Total uncertainty. Uh, we know we're in an election campaign on one hand. We know we're in the hands partially of someone who's unpredictable. That's one way of putting him. I won't go into the other ways of putting him. Um, we have a prime minister whose goal and only goal at this point is to be reelected. And any decision that's going to be made is going to be made through that prism. Maybe that's always been the case, but that's triply the case right now. Um, we have a situation where we are sort of stuck in Lebanon. And as you all know, I've been opposed to this venture in Lebanon from the beginning. I thought it was unnecessary and just created a set of problems that didn't exist for the moment, but we created them and now we're stuck in them. We can't allow the Iranians to determine what happens in Lebanon. That's what President Trump is willing to do. It seems Marco Rubio is someone else. And he and J.D. Vance are a little bit at odds here because the deal that he negotiated with the Lebanese government is a deal that does not work together with the deal that J.D. Vance agreed with the Iranian government. So we have a separate level of intrigue, two potential presidential hopefuls, two taking two different tracks. One who generally has been very pro-Israel, and one I think we can say without doubt, J.D. Vance is definitely not pro-Israel. Let's put it that way. Let's say that mildly. So J. Marco Rubio negotiated a arrangement with the Lebanese government, one that Israel likes, one that calls for a slow Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon only if Hezbollah is disarmed in those areas, the Lebanese government takes over those areas, all sorts of things that may be very difficult to accomplish. But it doesn't require Israel to withdraw completely like the Iranians are demanding. They demanded this afternoon, they wanted an exact timetable of when Israel is going to move out of Lebanon, and that's clearly not what the agreement with the Lebanese government has written in it. We have a situation where Hezbollah is against this agreement. This agreement basically calls for the Lebanese government to take over certain very specific places, replace Israeli troops, and that to be a pilot, and that to continue slowly but surely taking over more and more of southern Lebanon over a period of time and making sure that Hezbollah is not there. Hezbollah has basically declared war on this agreement, and therefore we can expect all sorts of problems in the coming days and weeks. And of course, this afternoon we got that terrible notice again on our phones, Hutar Presum. A soldier had died in southern Lebanon last night in a village within the area, the yellow zone, the area that Israel is theoretically holding on to. It's not clean of Hezbollah people, and a small firefight developed, and an Israeli soldier is dead. There will be more. That is the nature of a situation where we're sitting inside Lebanon and inside an area where Hezbollah partially operates. There'll be guerrilla attacks. There'll be all sorts of other things, assuming that Hezbollah and Iran want to blow up the agreement. Now, it's an assumption we don't know for sure. We don't really know what Iran wants to do at the moment. They're centered on the issue of the Straits of Hormuz. And there we see that the fools that signed an agreement with Iran really were foolish because the Iranians haven't given in anything. The deal was they'll get some money in return for opening up the straits. But they don't want to open up the straits. They only want to open the straits for the people they want. They're not willing to give up control over the straits. And if they're not giving up the control of the straits, why is the United States giving them any money or allowing them to get a hold of any money? Part of it, of course, was to get some oil out of the Gulf to alleviate what could be a major shortage coming up. I don't know whether the amount of oil that was released during this period of time is enough to make a difference, but that's the only result so far. Will there be daily attacks against ships that try to run the straits, and the United States responding every night. I don't know. I expect there'll be more of them as the Iranians try to test the Americans, and the American will is kind of weak, to say the least. Um, the original ceasefire agreement in April that ended the war was based on the immediate opening of the straits. That didn't happen, and instead of returning to war, and don't get me wrong, I'm not sure I was in favor of returning to war, but from the negotiating standpoint, Netanyahu, Trump should have returned to war immediately, even if it was just for a day or two, because the Iranians violated the agreement that they made. But the Iranians never keep their agreements. Mostly, they kept the JCPOA, at least the best of our knowledge, but they don't keep any other agreements, or they haven't, and certainly not in this case. And certainly when it's not at all clear who's totally in charge in Iran right now, that is an open question. Obviously, the Revolutionary Guard is generally in control. Does the supreme leader exist or not? We don't know. There's a lot of opinions going both ways, saying that he's just a figure, doesn't even exist. We have not seen him. We have not heard him. We've just seen statements released in his name. So we don't know whether he exists. But in any case, the fact of the matter is that they violated the very basis of the agreement. And Trump has downplayed it and talked about what wonderful people they are. I mean, it's really amusing if it wasn't so sad when he refers to the Iranians as wonderful people. These are not the same people as before. These are moderate people. These are people we can do business with. You name it. Any one of those different statements, which have no connection at all to reality, because the reality is these are people who are more extreme than the government that was there before the second war began. But that is Trump. He tries to sell anything he can to show his greatness, his success, and everything else. And from Israeli standpoint, the Israeli right, of course, blames everything on Trump. Everything was going just fine until Trump sold us down the river. They throw in Jared and Witkoff as players who sold off their Jewish brethren just for Gulf money. Why Trump did what he did is an open question. Why he decided to end the war so abruptly, my guess is he was requested to by his Gulf allies, but we don't know for sure. But that's the most likely scenario. That's what's happened. They requested it. They were getting hit too heavily, or they had other interests, whatever the interests were. He got the word from the people who gave him a nice big plane and also these other things, and made business deals with his kids and who knows whatever else. And he stopped the war. And he's very loath to restart it. Again, I repeat, I'm not sure I'm in favor of restarting it, but from a negotiating standpoint, the fact that he's not willing to restart it and the Iranians know it makes his negotiating position very tenuous, to say the least. And of course, our interests are not being preserved in any which way. I don't have any expectation that the nuclear fuel will be removed from Iran at any point along the way. I think we'll end up with some weak version of the JCPOA, the same agreement that Netanyahu insisted that Trump leave in 2018, and he did. And Netanyahu should never be reelected just for that reason, but that hasn't stopped them at this point. So it hasn't stopped Netanyahu. And as I wrote or said, and I'm not sure which, about a week ago, the moment the agreement was reached, the framework agreement between the United States and Iran, any normal prime minister would have resigned on that moment. But of course, Netanyahu is not a normal prime minister. Nothing would get him to resign. Nothing is going to give him to give up his seat of power. And so at the moment, we're stuck with him. That's the reality. Unclear. We will lose additional soldiers in Lebanon without doubt in the coming days and weeks if the current situation remains. I don't see any other scenario where that's not going to happen. The people in the north, while there'll be some level of quiet, it won't really be quiet. It's not going to induce people to come back. I don't think it's going to induce tourism up there, as the head of Metula, that's the northernmost city in Israel, beautiful city, that little town, not a city, it's a little village, so almost. The one that I visited with Eitan about, I don't know, before this war 3 months ago. They have no reservations for the summer. The favorite place to go in the summer heat, but no one is gone. No one is going there at the moment, um, and people are a little bit concerned. But more importantly, there are no tourists coming. Tourism in May was down 80%. I'm not sure from what point, but certainly from before all the wars, I think 80% may have been for last year. So we're talking about very, very low numbers. So no tourists coming to the country, um, which of course the hotels are doing, some of them are doing okay from internal tourism, but most are struggling. And of course, all the people in the secondary industry, the tour guides and bus operators, and you name it, they're all, of course, suffering greatly. Tourism was not that significant an element in the Israeli economy. We get a few million tourists a year compared to maybe 10% of the number of tourists as some of the European countries do, and 5% compared to places like Paris and other really popular destinations. But in any case, tourists are not coming, and of course that's not a good thing. But that's where we stand in terms of Lebanon. A lot of uncertainty. Uh, Hezbollah is going to do its best to mess up that agreement. In terms of Gaza, every single day we seem to kill one or two more theoretically Gazan people who were involved in October 7th. I'm not sure how we keep on finding more people to kill, but we have been. Um, if you're involved in October 7th and you're in Gaza, I would get out of there as fast as I can if you can, because Israel's been killing them one by one. Not that they don't deserve to die, but I think sometimes there are people who are not necessarily involved who get killed as well. And the question is, at this point, is it morally or correct at this point when we're at a ceasefire? But okay, I'm not necessarily going to get into that unless I'm asked about it. Um, there are those, particularly in the Southern Command, who are pushing for Israel to go and do a large-scale action in Gaza. These are military commanders who only have one solution, which is a military solution to every problem. Um, and again, there's this total disconnect between how many troops we have, how many soldiers we have, and the different responsibilities that the army has gotten. Every time we go somewhere else, we need more soldiers. The fact that we're occupying a not inconsequential part of Syria since Assad fell, the fact that we're occupying 60, 55% of Gaza, and of course, part of Lebanon, all of these things take more and more soldiers. The fact that a whole series of small outposts have been established on the West Bank, well, each one of them has to be protected in some way. All of that requires more soldiers. But guess what? The pool of soldiers hasn't grown. The ultra Orthodox have not drafted in any significant numbers. The number of 18-year-olds is not growing at this moment. I think it's in a bit of a demographic trough. It has to do with birth rates and everything else 18 years ago, certainly amongst the secular and non-ultra Orthodox. Another number that I heard just a little while ago, actually, that's concerning is that of the young people who post-army theoretically, only 22% of them have joined the workforce in the last year. This is compared to 60% in a normal year. So only 22% have joined the workforce. Now, part of that reason, it seems, is the number of injured soldiers. We're talking about the area of 20,000 soldiers that were injured during the war and are now not in the workplace. They include additional circles of people who are taking care of those soldiers. So you're talking about a large number of people who just can't join the workforce. You also have people who are doing too much reserve duty. When you do 100 and 150 days of reserve duty, you're not apt to suddenly join the workforce in your other days. It's not easy to get to know that you're going to be there for 2 months and nothing more than that. So the numbers are down drastically from the normal years. That puts additional strain on an economy that, again, is doing without Palestinian workers. is doing with foreign workers of various kinds. We come to go to our supermarket, and the cheese lady half the time is a very nice Vietnamese or Chinese. I'm not even sure what she is. Young lady. She's sweet. She's very nice. And when she first got there, she spoke neither Hebrew or English. She's slowly speaking a little bit of Hebrew, and so at least the important letters like how much you want, matayim, oh, I want 200 grams, matayim grams, she understands that. I can point to the cheese, she knows the names of the cheeses. So that started to work out a little bit. Lovely people, but that's who's working in our stores. And that's my neighborhood supermarket, and it's all over the country at this point. Um, so that's where we stand in terms of that. Uh, the high tech sector continues its 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 successes in the meantime. They haven't been affected in a huge way. Um, Money has continued to be raised. There continues to be exits, um, and at the moment things has continued to move. Thankfully, almost all of them are in the B2B business and not B2C. In other words, business to business and not business to consumer. I wouldn't want to be selling a consumer product from Israel, whether it's in Europe or the United States at the moment. Asia would be fine. But most of them are selling B2B, and businesses don't really care. Give me a better solution, they'll buy that solution. A lot of Israeli companies aren't even known to be Israeli, even though they are. Um, you know, no one's suggesting to boycott Apple because all the Apple chips are designed here in Israel, and no one's designed to avoid AWS because all of their chips are designed here in Israel. And I'll go on and on and on. But no one really knows. It's under the hood, so to speak. And none of these companies have pushed back on their investment here. Just the opposite, Nvidia, which is the hottest um, producer of AI chips or AI more than just chips, but actual boards, is investing much more in the country and building another campus here, spending hundreds of millions of dollars to build a new campus in the Galil. And they're heavily, heavily invested in this country and continue to invest even more so. So somehow the tech sector is still pulling most of the economy, and that's good, at least. Um, we're at the election point, like I said. Um, the polls have been reasonably steady, showing that the opposition parties without the Arabs, depending on the constellation, get 55, 57, 58, 59. And every once in a while, there's a poll with 61 votes that shows without the Arab parties. Can they pull that off? I don't know. Um, I have a sense there is. I think one of the major factors will be the fact that a lot of Likud voters may not come out, but it'll be Netanyahu's um, election campaign will be something to the effect that whoever it'll be, Eisenkot, Bennett, whoever it would be, will give up all the territorial gains that he made during the war. He'll give in to American pressure, etc., etc. He won the first time by saying that Paris would give back Jerusalem, and that's how he won his first election. He had Arthur Finkelstein, the Republican strategist, come up with that, and that worked for him. He will do some version of that in this election. Which version, I don't know, but it'll be some version of that. He will try to make everyone fear a government that'll have Yair Golan, the head of the Democratic, as part of the government. He'll fear that the left, quote unquote, and there is no such thing as left, in my opinion, at the moment, but he'll claim the left will go into a coalition with the Arabs, and that's a terrible thing, even though he was willing to do it. But we'll leave that part aside for the moment. But that'll be his campaign. Will it succeed? Just don't know. I do not want to write, take him for granted. He's a great politician, a terrible leader, but a great politician. And he's done well in the past. And I imagine he can do more than I would like in this election. As you people know, I've decided I'm very much involved in supporting Gadi Eisenkot. This is the first election I've gotten actually involved in, doing street campaigning, going to going to Hugei Bayit, in other words, meetings in houses, um, and talk and working with some of the people in the campaign, giving advice. Uh, this is the first time I've done that because I think it's just too important. We can't afford to lose this election. Um, there are an awful lot of people in this country that if we lose, I don't know what will be. Frankly, I don't know what will be with the future of the country either if we lose this election. It's vital that we bring back some sanity to our government, and more importantly, we bring back some capable people because we don't have capable people in this government. One of the biggest problems is the total incompetence of so many people in so many levels of this government. Um, I think Eisenkot is the person to unite people. I've seen how he's loved. He's not hated. It's almost impossible to create hatred towards him. First of all, because of his personality. Second, because he's unfortunately an Av Shakul. He lost his son in the war. On top of all of that, he's a Mizrahi. On top of all that, he's a Golanchik. He was in Golani. That's where he grew up. He didn't grow up in an elite unit. He grew up as Golani, which is considered, the infantry brigade of the people. And it's really hard to hate this man, and it's going to be really hard for Netanyahu to convince people to they have to get out and stop the first Moroccan prime minister of Israel from becoming prime minister. Not going to work too well, I don't think. Um, so I'm optimistic, but as I've said many times, you can't live here without being optimistic. So I'm definitely optimistic. I think those things will change. Will they really? We'll have to see. The hole is deep. And of course, that doesn't even get into the issues in the United States. Even Israelis got shocked. Well, it wasn't a big news item, but it was a news item by the three people who won the New York City primaries, uh, and especially the young woman who was a Columbia student. The fact that someone who states she hates America, forget the fact that she hates us, which is very clear in every which way, and participated on October 8th in Times Square in Hamas rallies, that she is going to be a U.S. congressman, making the members of the squad until now seem moderate and downright friendly. But this woman is going to be a member of Congress come January 1st. It'll obviously be a great attack vector for the Republicans. I was actually listening to Bill Maher, who spent most of his monologue attacking her. And he himself is generally a Democrat, but he spent the monologue attacking her. And I just imagine uh, what the Republican line is going to be against people who are against what she wants to defund the police. She wants to close all the prisons. And of course, she wants to uh, remove all support and everything else for Israel and everything else related to that. So that's who the Democrat primary voters voted for. As someone said, we wanted the young people to vote. Well, they came out and voted, but they don't seem to have much sechel. But we'll leave that part aside for the moment. Um, any case, I think that's all I have to say in my little monologue here. I'm hoping you people have questions. Anything I said or any other subjects relating to Israel at the moment, I'm more than happy to answer. Hopefully, I'll see your hands raised. So please use the Zoom to raise your hands or talk up if I don't see you. And Brian.
Hi, Mark. I'd be interested to hear more about what is Eisenkot's program, both in terms of the war, the conflict, but also the social program. What's the actual sort of manifesto for the party, other than being not Netanyahu?
Okay, so they have a whole manifesto. The official campaign is going to be launched on Tuesday night. Uh, I have a conflict. I'm not sure if I'm going to that or going to the Herzliya conference, but we'll leave that part aside. I will publish their official manifesto on Tuesday night. Um, I know a fair amount of it, um, and some of it I don't really even want to say because I don't think it'll be good for him. So we'll leave part of it on the side. Um, Look, um, there aren't very many differences. That's what people have to understand. The differences um, between any of the political parties, whether it's from Yair Golan up to up to Bennett and even Netanyahu and normal Netanyahu, which we don't have a normal Netanyahu, are not very large. Are not very large. He believes there needs to be an eventual separation between us and the Palestinians. How to achieve it is an interesting question. There is a real problem. There's a divide that exists that most of the world thinks there needs to be a Palestinian state, and no Israelis think there needs to be a Palestinian state now. And how do you bridge that gap is going to be a challenge anyone's going to have because uh, even Yair Golan does not believe there should be a Palestinian state now. Someday, maybe. But a lot of things have to happen before that happens. So if no one believes, no political views in the Israeli Zionist area think there can be a Palestinian state now, and everybody in the diaspora thinks there should be, it's going to be a hard thing to paper over. And it'll be necessary to talk about the fact that um, we need to find we need to find a way to get there in the future and talk about the future possibilities and certainly not the current possibilities. But he believes in the separation, and we need to maintain this separation. The major area, of course, is the issue of the ultra Orthodox draft. The person involved with him for that believes very strongly we have to stop working with the ultra Orthodox establishment, um, totally defund the ultra Orthodox establishment, help individual ultra Orthodox, but the whole what they call the skanim, all these people who specialize in getting money and doing this and doing that. There's a whole world there that stands between the government and the ultra Orthodox, and that has to be taken apart. And we have to take it apart completely and rebuild that community from start. And that's that person's view, and that view is pretty much Eisenkot's view because she's the person who he leans on most for that. Other social issues? What are the other social issues? Is it's kind of interesting. So he refuses to talk about the fact that he's Moroccan. He's a Moroccan, as he said. My parents are Moroccan, and they didn't have any discrimination that I knew about. And of course, I became the chief of staff of the army, and obviously, I didn't have any discrimination on my way up. So I'm refused to talk about. I'm proud to be Moroccan, but I refuse to make a big deal about that because I don't believe in shiftiyut, which means I don't believe in each group is separate, and we have to push this the separate groups. I believe his wife is an Anglo. I don't remember I don't know if she's English or American, but she's an Anglo. So he clearly doesn't, what are his children? Once again, the same situation. What are my grandchildren? So he doesn't believe in it. Um, Poverty? Look, the only poverty in this country, mostly the poverty in this country is amongst the ultra Orthodox and to some extent amongst the Arabs. There is no real poverty amongst I mean, there are always pockets. There's always people on the streets who don't make it and are drug addicts and everything else. But there is no problem of poverty in this country. When you hear about the million kids who are living in poverty, they're almost all ultra orthodox. Um, so there's no real policy to keep the social net, increase hospital spending. Yes, those sort of things. But we have this huge defense burden, and so um, and again, I would be hard pressed to find the differences between these different parties and what they'd actually do. The only areas that'll be a little bit iffy is going to be on the question of what to do with the illegal settlements that exist in the West Bank. Bennett has already said he would remove them. Got a lot of flack for that. I'm fairly sure that's would be Eisenkot's position as well, but I can't say that for sure. Anyone
I actually
else?
heard that.
Yeah,
Can I just well,
sure.
I read
Follow up.
that Bennett has announced a policy in relation to Area C, which is to annex it, uh, or parts of it at least. And there is a. I'm not saying I'm not a Bennett supporter, but I'm a supporter of anyone, certainly not Netanyahu. But when Bennett was prime minister, there was action taken in relation to trying to improve the Arab townships
Well, that's
to
what I'm about.
address.
There definitely will be this new government will do that without a doubt. My guess is that this new government will also have will have the Ram party as part of it, hopefully not based on it, but as an addition. So there will clearly be more resources given to to the Arab communities and a plan actually implemented. Look, today's been a terrible day. There have been five killings today. Five Arab Israelis were killed today in various, I don't even know what to describe it as. They're not clan fights, they're fights between gangs. I mean, five by 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 car bombs, by shootings. In one case, a father was killed before his 7-year-old son on the way to taking him to school. I mean, it's horrific, and it needs to be dealt with. You need a plan, and it's not a priority of this government, obviously, at all. And today, the education head of the Knesset Education Committee, who's to be worried about education in the schools because there's a lot of problems with education in the schools in this country. But we'll leave that part aside. Um, the Arabs, the head of the Education Committee, who is a well-known right-wing settler, decided he had to go to Fatah, which is an Arab village, Arab town, and go visit the school there because he claimed they were they were inciting against Jews, and so he had to make a big deal about that. So that's really where it stands at the moment. I'm hopeful. What can I tell you? Richard has asked a question here. What are the parties will make up the government of Eisenkot? If Eisenkot succeeds, it'll clearly be um, whatever's left of Bennett Lapid party. It'll be Lieberman. It'll be Yair Golan. Um, and I think that's it. Together at the moment, those parties are pulling close to 60. We'll have to see, but that should be enough. Um, it will not include the religious parties. There's no way that'll work. They have to agree to draft, and they're not agreeing to draft in any case. So I don't think it'll be the religious parties. Will there be Arab parties? I don't know. Um, Any rate, Victor here wrote the Epstein files and the fact that right and them want to reduce support for Israel by U.S. government. Yeah, the right and left want to support decrease the government by Israel. I've been in favor of that for a long time. I didn't think we need to take any money. Maybe now we need it, which is a whole other story. But prior to this war, we didn't need the money. It was a mistake still taking it. Um, but I'm not worried about the money. That doesn't worry me. Money, we have the money if necessary. What we don't have is if the United States decides to impose any sort of arms embargoes on Israel, and that's what's been threatened if by Trump, theoretically, if we don't listen to whatever he wants. That is something, Bibi was talking about. We should be smarter. Well, leaving the fact that we can't be smarter because half of Sparta will leave if we become smarter, because no one's interested in being smarter. But leave that part aside. To be smarter means we're independent in terms of arms. I think we theoretically could be, but it would require 5, 10 years worth of work in order to get there. It's not something you can do from today until tomorrow. And Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke, I think, in the first year of the war. I think it was maybe a little bit later when the little bit of arms embargo that Joe Biden, the president we all miss now. I always missed him, but Israelis now suddenly missed Biden. It's a really interesting change. But leave that part aside. Um, the He talked about we need to establish the basic chemical industries in order to make explosives. That's something we don't have in the country. In other words, we have the ability to make a missile that will land on a particular location. We can make artillery shells, not enough, but we can make them. But we don't have the ability to make the actual explosives. So that was 2 years ago, practically at this point. Uh, so um, nothing has happened. Nothing has happened in terms of that. We needed a Manhattan, program type actions to do everything we can to create that industry in a matter of a year, 2 years maximum. To the best of my knowledge, none of that has happened until now. It will eventually happen, I'm pretty sure, but eventually is eventually. And of course, it's probably not economical to do it, but that's a different story altogether. Uh, so um, I think, I think that's really the problem. And the real problem course, is the fear that the U.S. will remove all support for Israel diplomatically and not sell us arms and everything else like that. That is a real fear. And how quickly that's come about is quite amazing. Now, again, part of the reason that has happened is, of course, the views of the young people, which have changed radically. They were always a little bit more problematic than older people who don't have the historic view and everything else. But you look at all the polls of young people in America, and we're really in deep difficulty. We're not taking actions that we could to try to at least mitigate it to some extent. Part of it will be mitigated the moment a different government appears. The minute Netanyahu is not prime minister, the minute Smotrich and Ben Gvir hopefully end up being backbenchers in the parliament, the minute all those things happen and they're no longer ministers, things will improve. How much they'll improve, I don't know. It will not be easy. It will not be easy. And I tell this to people all the time at this point, and I try to influence the views here that we're in a deep hole. And in order to get out of that hole is going to require a concerted effort over a number of years. It'll require change of policy. It'll involve a change in attitude. It'll involve proactive things in the United States. There are many layers that the things that need to be done. Will we have the opportunity to do it? Is there enough time? If J.D. Vance becomes the next president of the United States, I don't think so. Depending on who the Democratic candidate is, and there will be there's a wide range of possibilities. I won't even hazard a guess who might be the Democratic candidate. Some will be okay for us, and some will be a disaster for us. So it's not good. It's not good. We have, I can't believe that I'm hoping for the good health and physical whatever of President Donald Trump, because we're not ready for J.D. Vance anytime in the next year and a half. And again, not that Trump is particularly good for us right now, but he's not what J.D. Vance will be. And again, I feel sorry. The American in me, the American historian in me, would like a new government instantly, but I'm not sure if J.D. Vance government will be much better. But that's something else. But for Israel, J.D. Vance right now becoming president will be catastrophic. So, you don't have to vote on it right now, so I can't tell. It's Americans don't have to vote right now who they want for president, but in 2 years there's going to be a stark choice. Maybe we don't know yet who it's going to be. Someone,
Mark, excuse me, I can't
go ahead,
see.
go ahead, go
It's
ahead.
Claude.
Yes.
Any news on what's going on with the destruction of the tunnels in Gaza?
Okay, so the tunnels that are in the area that Israel is currently occupying, which is 56%, 57%, are being all destroyed. Slowly, systematically, they're all being destroyed. That's a good thing. The tunnels inside the 48% or so, or 42% that the Hamas still controls, are being rebuilt and strengthened and being ready to be used some more. Again, look, Hamas is a terror organization that terrorizes its own people. There was supposed to be a demonstration against Hamas on, I guess it was Friday, and they terrorized everybody and threatened to kill anybody who showed up at the demonstration. So there was no demonstration. People in America and the world think, Hamas, liberation, resistance. They're a terror organization that is a religious fascist organization that terrorizes its own people, and of course would like to destroy us. But what do we do about it? We keep them penned up in a small part of Gaza right now. I think we should be rebuilding outside of the area that Hamas is in, and slowly moving population people into those new areas. But that would again would require thoughtfulness on part of government. That being thoughtful is not one of its strong suits. It's really just a question of ideology. Anyone else? Okay.
Okay, I have one more.
Go ahead.
If Eisenkot forms a government, will this truly be the first Israeli coalition government without the religious parties?
No. So
No.
first of all, there was a coalition in 2014. Bennett and Lapid joined with Likud and they formed a government. Um, they started making reforms, but they didn't move quick enough. And what happened in the end is the government was brought down by Netanyahu because he was uncomfortable not being with his traditional allies, which were the religious. And so he basically brought down his own government in order to create a new government with the religious. He is most happy with the religious. That's his soft spot. They don't cause him problems in areas that, he can be as um, corrupt or do whatever he wants. The religious don't care as long as they get paid off in what they want. And so he's kept with them throughout. He prefers them. Going back historically, you almost all the governments had some religious, but they were never this religious. They were what's called the original National Religious Party, Avram Burg. These people were basically left of center. They were not big into settlements and all these sort of things. It was a completely different situation. And they also didn't believe in imposing their religious views on the rest of the country in the same way. So, but basically, the Likud has gone into business. Likud made a deal with the religious in 77, and that deal became deep and strong in 1981 when Begin made a deal with Rav Shach and created an unbreakable bond, I would almost say, between the ultra Orthodox and the Likud. And we say religious, so mostly referring to the ultra Orthodox, of course, not the others. Anyone else? Okay. Well, if that's the case, I will thank you all. Hopefully, it'll be quiet weeks. It's going into the summer. I don't know what's going to happen in the Straits of Hormuz tonight, tomorrow night, and going forward. I don't expect we'll go to full warfare again anytime soon. Trump desperately doesn't want it. The Iranians don't want it at this point. The deal is too good. There is one view here in Israel that after the midterm elections, that's when Trump is going to go back to war. I don't believe it, but that's the hope of the people who keep on hoping that at that point he'll go back to war against the Iranians. Then, like I said, I don't believe it, but who knows? We don't need any more war at the moment. We needed a more reasonable solution. Trump is a terrible negotiator. But of course, when you make it clear that you put all your cards on the table, you make it clear you're not willing to go back to war, then you lose the only incentive the other side has to make any sort of concessions. And that's what he did. So for the person who wrote The Art of the Deal, or at least he signed the ghostwritten book called The Art of the Deal, he's a terrible deal maker. So on that note, I will thank you all. We'll see you all in a month, give or take a week. Hopefully things will be quiet and there'll be no need for any sort of emergency Zoom conference. So thank you all. Have a great summer. Enjoy 4th of July for those of you in New York or all over the United States, 250 years. The 200 years were really great. I remember that. I was actually here. That was the year of Entebbe. We have big celebrations here in Israel as well. Here in Israel, there's no celebrations for America's 250. Maybe the ambassador will have his yearly party, but that's it. But enjoy. Thank you all very much. Take care.